if God's given us a message for every nation, kindred, tongue, and people, if God is calling us back to worship the Creator, has He given a sign of His creative authority? Has He given an emblem of His creative power found within His commandments? Revelation 14:7 says, read it with me, worship the what? Creator. Revelation 14:9 says, don't worship the what? Beast. Revelation 14:12 says, this conflict over worship finds its apex, its center, its heart, its core in the keeping of the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. So in the last days, God will have people that have faith in Jesus. They love Jesus with all their lives. They have the faith of Jesus. His faith lives in their heart. This leads them, because they're saved by grace through the faith of Jesus, to keep His commandments. But has He left a sign of His creative authority? How do we worship Him as Creator? Revelation 14:7 says, worship the Creator. But how do we worship the Creator of heaven and earth and find the security, the rest, the peace, the freedom from anxiety that He offers? Has He left a sign of that creative authority? Let's go to the book of Genesis. Revelation, the last book of the Bible, calls us to worship the Creator. We go back to Genesis in the day that He created the earth, and we say, if Revelation is calling us to worship the Creator, is there a symbol of His creative authority? Is there a way that we worship Him as Creator given in Genesis? When God created the world, He created something out of nothing. He carpeted this earth with living green and made earth magnificent and beautiful. He planted the fruit trees and the flower trees. He put the sun in the heavens. He created the animals, and in the crowning work of creation, He created Adam and Eve. And after creating them on the sixth day, the Bible tells us that on the seventh day, Genesis 2, verse 2 and 3, on the seventh day, God ended His work, which He had done. And He rested on the seventh day from all His work, which He had done. And then God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it. At the end of creation week, on the seventh day Sabbath, God left to all humanity a sign for everybody that would ever live in all nations of the world of worshiping the Creator. He took the seventh day, 24 hours, and He blessed that seventh day. He sanctified it. He set it apart from all the rest of the days. And He rested on that seventh day so that there would never be an atheist, so that human beings would never be caught up in materialism, so they would never be filled with worry and anxiety and tension. God set apart the seventh day Sabbath, and every Sabbath they were to come. They were to worship Him and acknowledge that He was the Creator. They were to come and find their rest in Him and understand that they had a loving God that cared for them and loved them beyond what they could ever imagine. The seventh day Sabbath was to be a refuge. The seventh day Sabbath was to be a sanctuary. The seventh day Sabbath was to bring our hearts at rest in oneness with our Creator every single week. You see, the seventh day Sabbath given at creation was to be God's perpetual reminder of our roots. We did not evolve. We are not simply genetic accidents. We're not simply skin covering bones. Every Sabbath, all humanity was to come and say, God, you created me. I'm special to you. God, you created me. You made me. We find our hearts in rest. Now, there are those people even today, and some Christians, that say the Sabbath was simply given to the Jews. But wait a minute. When did the Jews come along? You have Abraham, and then Isaac and Jacob has 12 what? Sons, and those 12 sons become the 12 tribes of Israel, and one of those sons' name is what? Judah. And so the Jews come out of the tribes of Israel, of Judah, in the days of Abraham. That was 2,300 years after creation. Abraham lived 1,900 years BC. So when God created Adam and Eve, there were no Jews around. The human race had celebrated Sabbath for 2,300 years before the Jews came on. They had celebrated 100,000 Sabbaths. Was Adam a Jew? Certainly not. Was Eve a Jew? Certainly not. And so God gave the Sabbath not to the Jewish race, but to Adam and Eve to worship Him as Creator. And the book of Revelation is calling us back to worship God as Creator in the last days in this conflict over worship. Somebody says, but wait a minute, all days are alike. But the Bible says God blessed what? The seventh day. Now suppose I had 7 Bibles up here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And suppose I took, what's the largest Singaporean bill? Do you have a $100 bill in Singapore? Do you have a $500 bill in Singapore? What's the largest bill? 1,000. Any bills larger than 1,000? Oh, you got a 10,000 one. Any bills larger than 10,000? You got a 10,000 one. Could I see one of those? I never saw one before. Okay, suppose I was going to take up the offering. Suppose I had 10,000 Singaporean dollars, okay? I put it in this Bible. Are you with me? Now, did God put something in the seventh day? What did He do? It says God did what to the seventh day? Blessed it. So I have 7 Bibles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I put a 10,000 Singaporean bill in the 7th Bible. And I say, who wants to be blessed? You can have any one of these Bibles. Which one are you going to take? Why are you going to take the 7th? Because I put something there that wasn't there before. Can you get a blessing on any day you worship? If you worship on the first day, can you get a blessing? Sure. Can you get a blessing on the second day if you worship? Sure. But if you want the Sabbath blessing, where do you have to go? You have to go to the 7th day because that's the only place it's put. And if you want God's $10,000 Sabbath blessing, go to the Sabbath day because that's exactly where God put it. All these people say, well, you can worship on any day. Oh, sure, you can get a blessing any day. I can get a blessing any Bible I read. But if I want the 10,000 blessing, I got to go where the man put it, right? God put His blessing where? You can get a blessing any day, but you can't get the Sabbath blessing any day because that's only put one place. God, the Bible says God blessed the 7th day. It doesn't say bless the 1st, the 3rd, or the 5th. Secondly, the Bible says God sanctified the 7th day. Does anybody know what the word sanctify means? Sanctify means to do what? Set aside. Is there any place in the Bible that says God sanctified the 1st day or the 2nd or the 3rd? The Bible says God sanctified the 7th day. It means He set it apart for holy use. Now, God uses that same term in marriage, that He sanctifies one woman for one man. The Bible also says God rested on the 7th day. God blessed the 7th day by making it an eternal sign of His power and creation and love. He put a special blessing in it every time we worship on the 7th day. We say, God, you created me. God, you loved me. God sanctified the 7th day, just as one woman is set apart for one man. I remember the day I married my bride. Oh, yeah. June 25th, 1967. We've been married for 41 years. Oh, I remember that day. I was standing there at that wedding altar. I saw my lovely bride come down. She looks just like now she did then. and so I was standing there, you know, my heart was beating. And I saw her coming down the aisle, and she came down, and the preacher said, do you? And before he did, I was about ready to say, I do. We were married. One was sanctified for me. Now, let's suppose that my wife, this is not her, but let's suppose my wife had 6 sisters. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And she was the 7th one. Let's suppose she's sanctified for me. I'm getting in the car. We're getting ready to go on the honeymoon. One of her sisters comes in. And I look at her and I say, I didn't marry you. I married that beautiful one. I didn't marry you. And the sister says, 1 in 7, what difference does it make? Does 1 in 7 make a difference? If you Singaporean men married your beautiful wife, do you want one of the sisters given to you? You married that one, right? God says, not any one of the 7 days, but the Bible says God sanctified what day? The 7th. What day did God bless? The 7th. He put a special blessing there. He sanctified the 7th. He set it aside. He rested on the 7th. The Sabbath is a memorial that God created the world. It's a place of refuge. It's God's palace in time. Every Sabbath, we enter the palace of God. Every 7th day, we come to worship the God that made the beauties of nature. We come to worship the God that is the creator of all, that loves us. Throughout the Old Testament, the Sabbath was a sign between God and his people. Throughout the New Testament, the Sabbath was not given to the Jews. It was given to all humanity. You remember the Bible talks about the manna that fell in the wilderness? The manna fell from heaven, that bread from heaven when the Israelites were starving. It fell for 6 days. But because the Sabbath was so important to God and to his people, on the 6th day, twice as much fell. They kept it over to the 7th day. None fell on the 7th day, and they ate that which they saved from the 6th day. You know, if they would have tried to save manna from the 3rd day to the 4th, it would spoil. If they went out on the Sabbath to collect it, none would fall. God worked a triple miracle on the Sabbath. Twice as much fell on the 6th day, worked a triple miracle to show them the importance of the Sabbath. None fell on the 7th, and the manna didn't spoil. Some of the Israelites, though, went out to gather manna on the 7th day rather than worshiping the Creator God. And God said to them, Exodus 16, verse 28, how long do you refuse to keep my commandments and my laws? This is before Mount Sinai. It's before he wrote the 10 Commandments with his own finger. You see, Cain knew that it was wrong to kill Abel. The 10 Commandments were in existence at creation. The Sabbath was in existence at creation. God wrote it in Adam and Eve's heart. It was written in their heart. They knew it was wrong to kill. They knew it was wrong to commit adultery. They knew it was wrong to violate the Sabbath. It was written in their hearts. When Israel broke the commands, God then came and wrote the 10 commands on tables of stone. Now let me ask you a question. Who wrote the 10 commandments? Who did that? I just mentioned it. Who did it? God did. In all the Bible, is there any other law written with God's own finger on tables of stone? Why do you think God wrote the 10 commandments on tables of stone? Why didn't he just write them in sand? They'd be washed away. Why didn't he write them on parchment? They could be burned up. If there's only one set of commandments in the Bible written on tables of stone with the finger of God, don't you think they're pretty important? Don't you think it would be very dangerous for us as Christians who are saved by grace just to turn our backs on the commandments that God has given? If the only thing that God gave in the whole Bible, written with his own finger for commands, were on tables of stone, he wrote them on stone because they were so important. God wrote the law to endure forever, never to be changed by man. One of those commandments, Exodus 20, verse 8 to 11, read it with me, please. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. God said to do what? Remember. Why do you think God said to remember regarding the Sabbath? He must have known that all mankind and most of humanity would forget. He must have known that the human race would tend to forget. He always has had faithful men and women down through the ages that have kept the Sabbath. God said, remember. If God wrote the 10 Commandments on tables of stone as a memorial of his creation, if God said to remember, it must be very, very important. Why did God say to remember? because he knew that we would forget. Exodus 20, verse 8 to 11, 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day, the Bible doesn't say a seventh day, it doesn't say 1 day and 7, is the Sabbath. Does it say it's the Sabbath of the Jew here? Who is the Sabbath of? The Sabbath of who? The Lord your God. So the commandment itself says it's the Sabbath of the Lord your God. Now the Sabbath is a memorial of creation. It's the birthday of the world. Let's suppose you were born on May 24. Would all the celebrations the day before your birthday on May 23rd, or all the celebrations the day after your birthday on May 25, make those days your birthday? Not at all. God has a birthday for the world. And every Sabbath we celebrate that God created the world. The Bible says, Exodus 20, 8 to 11, what is the sign of creation? What does it mean when in Revelation it says, in Revelation chapter 14, verse 7, worship the Creator? How do we worship the Creator? By keeping the Bible Sabbath. Because he says, remember the Sabbath day, for in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them. And he rested on the seventh day. Therefore,